Hello and welcome back to Darts News Weekly, once again joined by Samuel Gill. Sam, it's been a strange weekend. We have a second time European Tour winner. We've seen, to some extent, maybe the return of Michael van Gerwen. We'll hear your thoughts on that a little bit later. And we've got a 32-man field for the European Championship. We've got a good weekend, well, a good 4 days in prospect from Thursday, starting with the Uber session at 3 p.m. on ITV4. But first of all, we have to start with the European Tour weekend's action. Joe Cullen winning his second European Tour event and back into the top 16 in the world as well.
Yeah, and of course a Grand Slam spot as well, which he's been very much vocal about in the past in terms of not actually being able to qualify for it. Here he didn't qualify, and he made the point as well the year before that he won 2 Pro Tours and didn't qualify either. And yeah, for me, he almost went under the radar this weekend. You had, of course, as usual, the big names, but then you had a few players that kind of were making European Tour debuts, even that put themselves potentially in European Championship contention, but only just missed out. He started off against Marjanovic, who saw off Jamie Lewis, which I'm guessing we'll go into very shortly in the abuse he suffered after that game. Dave Chisnell, where he pounced on Paul Dublin, ended Smith there. He was really impressive against another Smith, in Michael Smith as well. So yeah, it was kind of one of those weekends where at times he took his chances. He was quite vocal after the tournament that against Ross Smith in particular. He kind of rode his luck, but against Van Gerwen, in my opinion, he was the only player actually in that match. Van Gerwen, a bit like the Jose de Sousa game the week before in the final. He kind of wasn't ever really in the final, and it's not like Van Gerwen. Usually he has those afterburners where he can come into a game behind, but again, he just didn't look like he was going to kick into life really in that final. And yeah, I'm guessing we'll go into that in terms of Van Gerwen. But yeah, an impressive win for Cullen. Not one I saw coming, but a pleasant winner nonetheless.
Yeah, and being in the top 16 now, obviously, that puts him in a good position for lots of other tournaments in terms of qualification. Obviously, in the Worlds now, it would mean he would meet the world number one, Michael van Gerwen, should they get through their respective early round ties. But with Joe Cullen, he's been threatening this for quite a while now. Saw him return to form sort of after lockdown going into the tournament, and he thought he was going to really produce. And with the darts we've seen this weekend, he's a dangerous player. He's a name that people will start to look at, not just to make the latter stages, but possibly win some of these tournaments. We haven't seen him win on TV yet, but with the form he's in, there's no reason why he can't. We've seen it with Dimitri Vandenberg, and we've seen obviously Dirk van Dijvenbode in a final of a TV major this year. So we've seen outsiders come through the field into latter stages, and Joe Cullen is one I would now probably expect to be there. Just touching on the other end of the scale, you mentioned it just then, Jamie Lewis. We know what his plans are towards the end of the season, obviously after the World Championship. It's very, very sad to see how he performed on Friday against Robert Marjanovic, a player that's reached a PDC World Championship semi-finals, represented Wales at the World Cup, and once a very, very promising player. But every player has spots and spells where they don't reach the heights where they were at one time, and unfortunately this weekend didn't go right for Jamie Lewis, whether it's the lack of practice, whether it's a mental mindset. It just didn't work for him. But the more he gets back on the board, and I think a little bit of time away might do him a little bit good now, but the abuse he's had on social media because of his performance, obviously people had put a couple of quid on Jamie Lewis to win that match. There's absolutely no need for that, and hopefully a little bit of time away will do him some good.
Yeah, definitely. I think he ended up saying he had problems with anxiety after the game. He's quite open about that, and you could tell that potentially he might need, whether it's the rest of the year off or potentially a year off, to kind of correct what's going on, because yeah, it is really sad to see. I remember a game in particular in the German Darts Masters against Dimitri Vandenberg, where they had hit heights only 2 years ago. After his brilliant World Championship run, and everybody thought he was going to kick on from there, and were even moving Premier League places for him. But through no fault of his own in some cases, and also due to Pro Tour form as well, he's kind of slid down. And it's just shocking to see. As much as the 59 average isn't great, like he actually bothered to turn up this weekend, where otherwise he potentially wouldn't have done. And for me that shows courage in itself, knowing if he knows what's going on, if he knows what's going on in his head mentally, and he's not doing great, to actually show the courage to turn up to the event is an achievement in itself, I'd say.
Yeah, I completely agree with you there, and obviously thoughts go out to Jamie Lewis, obviously struggling at the moment, and we do wish to see him performing in the months to come, and hopefully we'll see him soon back to where he was. So moving on to one of the other star performers of the weekend, Ross Smith. Came from nowhere really, and he produced some fantastic darts to make it to the final session on the Euro Tour. And you know what, with performances like that, he's got to be another name that's considered in the European Championships. He faces Michael Smith, which is an extremely tough opening round tie, but with it being that 1st to 6 format, there's bound to be some shocks, and he's a name that I'd pull out the hat to produce one on the Thursday.
Yeah, I definitely agree in terms of Ross. For me, he's always been a player who can produce this top level, and he started off the weekend with 112 average. He then defeated Gerwen Price, who we know is absolutely imperious in Risa. To be honest, he has been for the past 2 years, because Van Gerwen hasn't actually played in the event and he's never actually won in Risa. But yeah, he came from 4-0 down to end up toppling him in a deciding leg, and from there he was. Like I said, in terms of Joe Cullen, he even admitted in the quarterfinals that he was very much lucky to actually get through, and he could have even gone all the way. But I think for him, especially if he would have known that he would have achieved his goal in terms of qualifying for the European Championship, it might have took his level down a bit. But hopefully we do see the continuation of form. It did kind of come out of nowhere, but he was playing PDC Home Tour 2 action. He came last in his group, in the Championship group, which Lloyd Humphreys won. But yeah, he's had that match practice, albeit he kind of took onto the stage, and he was thumping in huge averages, and a lot of the time he was only losing due to absolutely brilliant performances from his opponents. So yeah, I'd say I saw it coming, but it's like anything. I didn't when he actually got onto the stage and hit that 112 average.
Yeah, good performance this weekend from Ross Smith, and an improved performance from Michael van Gerwen. As you say, he's never won the event in Risa, but he made the final. I believe it's his 5th consecutive European Tour final loss, which is not what we expect from Michael van Gerwen. But we did see signs. The opening couple of rounds weren't good by his own admission, particularly that game against Andy Hamilton. But he made a final, and there were signs at times that we're seeing a bit of old Michael van Gerwen, but I imagine you agree with me in the case that there is a long way to go yet until we see 2013-14 Michael van Gerwen.
Yeah, it's like I even said to you over the weekend, Hamilton, of course, only missed the ball to beat him. I'd say Madders Rasmus should have beaten him in the second round on the Saturday. He kind of bottled multiple chances to kind of hit the winning double and potentially capitalise. He was level with Van Gerwen, and Van Gerwen just ended up streaking ahead to the finish line. In terms of Mensah was the same in the latter stages. He faced him for the second consecutive week in a semi-final, but he ended up coming up short and missing match darts this time in Sindelfingen, and he didn't have any match darts and was quite poor into Van Gerwen. I'd say the standout performance, of course, was James Wade, where he hit that 102 average and everybody thought he was back, and then he kind of, against Suljovic, he kind of showed that there is a bit more to go. People as usual, though, on social media over the weekend, I've been saying that he's finished and that he's not going to win another final. And it'd just be Michael van Gerwen-esque if he ended up turning up at the European Championships next weekend, having not won a European tour this season, and he goes on and wins it. I'm not saying it's a crisis for Van Gerwen at the moment, but it has to be worrying in terms of the last two finals. I wouldn't really say he wasn't in either of them, like I said, against the Caesar or Cullen, both and produced. Then, as he always says, they ended up taking out the right shots at the right moments, and yeah, they ended up coming out on top. And I think he just needs a confidence booster. For me, a title of sorts, which he can achieve in the next few weeks. We're not really short of any darts. Even if he goes on and wins the World Cup with an informed Danny Noppert, it'll be a massive confidence booster going into the end of the year. So I wouldn't say it's a massive crisis for Van Gerwen yet, but you've got to kind of be thinking that he does need to pick up a title within the next 2 months, I'd say.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of timing, I would say it's not too bad. There's so many tournaments around the corner that you would expect Michael van Gerwen to pick up one of those, even not playing his best darts. He didn't play well over the weekend, but he reached the final. So if he can scrape through the early rounds in the European Championship or maybe even the Grand Slam, then you've got to fancy him to win something before the World Championships. And that will be crucial. If he wins something before the World Championships, he goes into that tournament with confidence behind him. If he doesn't win something before the World Championships, there are probably people in his ear saying it is a crisis. Whether it is or whether it isn't is up to interpretation. But if he doesn't win a tournament before the World Championship, there's going to be something going on in his head to say that it's not quite there, the game that it used to be. The World Championship is the biggest tournament of the year, obviously. And he will want to go into that playing his best darts, and he needs to win the tournament in order to be in that position.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. For him, a lot of the time this weekend, it was his doubling that let him down. There was times where he was absolutely brilliant on it, but he was just inconsistent. He had, even in the final, he had multiple chances to hit doubles and been taken. And for me, he'll always be that player who can get, and it's why he's so good. As much as people say he's finished or he's not at his best anymore, he'll always be that player who can play his C game and get through games against players who try their hardest, but they still come up against the brick wall that is the world number one. But he's got to be thinking as well in terms of the world number one spot. Even towards the end of the year, you've got Peter Wright and Gerwyn Price. Wright, albeit hasn't been in the best form in the past few months, but Price has. As much as he's been out in the last 2 European Tour events. And I even saw an interview with him over the weekend where he said that he's already got that Grand Slam money that he potentially would accrue next month. So it'd be even better if he wins the Grand Slam. But of course, he's won the World Grand Prix, and then it'd either take him or Peter Wright to win the Worlds, and they'd be world number one. That's the Worlds. And imagine a darting world with a different world number one. So he's got a lot of money to defend as well, but I'd say one tournament that potentially sticks out for me that he could go on and win quite easily is the Players' Championship Finals. He's been imperious in that tournament over the past few years. And of course, Daryl Gurney's brilliant 2 years ago, and he has to defend that money this time, speaking of defending money. But yeah, no, I definitely say that not only for his ranking, but also, like I say, for his confidence. He needs a title win. Like I say, even if it's the World Cup, even having that winning feeling again. He doesn't really do it on the autumn or the summer series, and he will likely win an event in the winter series in the next few weeks. But yeah, it won't cut the TV time and the fact he hasn't with the UK Open. So yeah.
So now we'll have a quick look at the upcoming European Championships, 4 days of action in front of a crowd, as we have seen with the European Tour, should I say. Some interesting ties. Obviously, the seedings are done on the European Tour Order of Merit as opposed to the PDC main Order of Merit. So Joe Cullen is the first seed, Michael van Gerwen a little further down. Some of the ties I want to pull out, I mean, there's plenty we could cover. But first of all, Mensur Suljovic against Daryl Gurney looks a fairly interesting one. And you will say if Suljovic and Ratajski both get through their games, they meet in the second rounds, I believe you mentioned earlier on. But Suljovic Gurney over a short format could be a bit of a cracker, couldn't it?
Yeah, definitely. Gurney, while Suljovic has been in all right form as of late, he's played quite well on the European Tour, barring of course his last performance against Van Gerwen yesterday, where he should have won. But yeah, no, Gurney, we haven't really seen that much of him as such. He's kind of he's not really. He had a run last week on the European Tour, but this weekend, yeah, nothing really to shout about. And for him as well, like I said, in terms of the players, he's got a lot of money to defend. He could be sliding down those rankings very soon if he doesn't pull out potentially another major tournament win. So it could be the perfect opportunity for him this weekend to kind of arrest that sliding form and get to the latter stages and get a bit of money banked. But against Suljovic, he has a very formidable opponent. And it's the same with the Ratajski-Steve West game. Both ended up playing each other. We can Suljovic and Ratajski, and it was an absolute cracker. So I'm expecting that again in the second round, and I'm looking forward to it if it is Suljovic versus Ratajski.
Yeah, one more game I'll give you before I let you have a crack. Rob Cross, Martin Kleermaker. We haven't seen Martin Kleermaker too much on the TV since he got his tour card. And a bit of a darting enigma, really. You can either average in the high 90s and crack in the 180s, or you can average in the low 80s, and you don't really know what you're going to get from Martin Kleermaker. Rob Cross, haven't seen him too much. Actually, did well at the World Series finals. Made the final there, of course, losing to Gerwyn Price, but wasn't brilliant at the World Grand Prix. And another chance on TV for Rob Cross against an opponent I'm sure he wouldn't have faced too many times.
Yeah, in terms of Cross, you never know what you're going to get. Everybody said it this time last year in terms of his form line. They wouldn't have had a chance of winning both the World Match Play or the European Championship, and he popped up, despite him never having won a European Tour event. And it's an interesting statistic that I will always kind of go back to, that he's won all these tournaments and he's never actually won a European Tour. But yeah, no, in terms of Kleermaker, like, he's a quality player. He's one of my favourites to watch. But again, it's the inconsistency for me, and he's only going to get better in terms of that. He showed it again in terms of match experience. He showed it again this weekend. He played like a no-name qualifier from the host nation, who ran him really close to survive. He survived more. He kind of averages him, for me, between 79 usually, or 92, 93 mark. He's kind of always in between. He'll play well one game, play poor the other, and it's just big match experience. Of course, playing on the floor in the BDO, it's very much, you could get one game where it's, fairly easy, and then the following game, it's really tough, and you have to dig deep. And he kind of showed his title winning form in the BDO, but he has to kind of arrest that inconsistency if he's going to go for titles. This will be his first time on TV as well, since getting his tour card at the European Championship. So hopefully with the crowd behind him and the TV lights, he might be able to produce a shock win, even though for me it wouldn't be too much of a shock, depending on how Rob Cross plays. Other ties for me, I'd say Michael Smith, Ross Smith. Like we said about Ross Smith, he's been playing great. Michael Smith as well. He hasn't really played that well on the European Tour for a long time. He's been very heavily critical of the European Tour and all the travelling, especially to a place like, of course, Riesa, where it's really hard to travel to. Yeah, he showed some good form this weekend, and it was quite a surprise to me that he was in the latter stages, which is a surprise in itself. And then of course we have the double Dutch tie between Danny Noppert and Dirk van Dijvenbode. Dirk, of course, coming off his World Grand Prix run, but facing a really formidable opponent in Noppert, who, for me, he'll kind of, despite him not winning a title this year, he will go for me as one of the players, one of the most improved players this year, I'd say, in terms of his form. He's always a quality player. He's only a few titles and from potentially breaking out, in my opinion. Of course, so reached a final last year on TV. Other games, I'd say, and I said this earlier, Peter Wright, Gabriel Clemens for me. Right, for me, he hasn't played for quite some time, by of course the Premier League finals now, which of course is a completely different kettle of fish because it's one night shootout really. But he's driving to Oberhausen from the UK, and we even ended up seeing from another player who will be playing against Devon Peterson and Andy Hamilton. He's driving over 400 kilometres to get to Oberhausen from Riesa. So Wright has said that he's driving from the UK to Germany. He of course won't be in the World Cup either, so it's going to be a bit of a Gary Anderson-esque mission for me in terms of seeing what kind of form he's going to be in without little game time. And against Clemens, especially in front of the home crowd, he could be in trouble. Of course, we'll end up seeing Max Hopp again against Johnny Clayton, Michael van Gerwen, Darius Labanauskas is another game to look out for. For me, of course, Labanauskas, as you know, I'm a big fan of, and he can definitely turn up on his day. He reached the last stage of the World this past January, and face Van Gerwen, of course, en route to Van Gerwen's run, and I'd say two more ties to potentially look out for: Jamie Hughes, Dave Chisnell. Chisnell had poor doubling, but it's been in really good form as of late, and Hughes always has the potential to mix it up, and a return for Andy Hamilton, like I say, for the first time since at the start of the year, which is a really welcome sight. Made his return to competitive action this weekend after leaving the autumn series early due to illness after a fall. He's kind of took time to recuperate and played some good stuff this weekend, barring losing to Van Gerwen, and of course playing against Devon Peterson. He's got a formidable opponent who, and that's a game I'm really looking forward to, definitely.
Yeah, Andy Hamilton's got a really tough tie in Devon Peterson, but for me, it's just great to see Andy Hamilton back on TV. I mean, he was a player that I watched growing up when he was in his pomp in the PDC. He made a World Championship final, of course. So I was sad to see him sort of decline and obviously move over to the BDO. Didn't produce his best in the BDO system, but when I spoke to him a couple of times over sort of the World Championships and even over in Bridlington, that he just wanted to be back on the PDC tour, and that was always his aim. He was never going to be away for a long time, but for a player to slip down the rankings and obviously lose his tour card and then come back and he's back on TV now. I mean, he's not producing his best darts by a long shot, but just to see him back on TV is a big confidence boost for Andy, I'm sure, and I reckon he'll probably have his eye on the World Championships. I know we've got a little way to go yet, but a few good performances in the Winter Series, and he could put himself right back in the mix. You mentioned Ross Smith, Michael Smith. For me, if Ross Smith, if he gets through that game, there's a good chance we could see Ross Smith at the back end of the tournament. But there's so many names you could pick out from that first round, so many. But for me, the outside chancer is Danny Noppert. With the form he's been in the last 6 months, you could even stretch it to a year if you want to. He is showing some real good signs and a chance of being inside that top 16 very, very soon. A fantastic player. He never really skyrocketed the averages into the 100 mark, but you know what you're going to get from Danny Noppert, and that will stand him in good stead. And for me, he's in for a good run this weekend. Got any predictions, Sam?
Yeah, a long session on Thursday. That's what I got a prediction for. It all starts at 3 p.m. on ITV4, lasts until 11. So I'll be all over that all evening, a lot of coffee. But I think that's my prediction. But yeah, no, in terms of the event itself, you've got to kind of look after the first round in terms of course, how much Peter Wright and Gerwen Price, the big three in darts, do. If we get one or two of them falling early doors, it could be an absolute landslide in terms of who comes through. But one name I'd potentially pick out, he's in the same side of the draw as Van Gerwen, would be James Wade. Again, he's a player that gets picked out quite a bit, but he showed 2 years. He showed 2 years ago where he won this event alongside the World Series of Darts finals. He plays really well this time of year. He's got Steve Lennon in the first round, and that he potentially play Nathan Aspinall or Mike Kuyvenhoven, who has potential to mix it up. If it's Kuyvenhoven, even it could be a good chance of a good run. Of course, he'll be in the same section as well as the likes of Joe Cullen, who will be top seed. So yeah, for me, James Wade is an outside shout. Of course, you're going to look at Gezi. He has Kim Hybrex in the first round. He's played all right. He's kind of fluctuated in and out of form, but he's 31st seed in the tournament. And yeah, I think considering Gezi's won the last 2 TV tournaments, of course, barring the Premier League, which Durham won in the end. Of course, he's not going to be in Oberhausen for different reasons. But yeah, I wouldn't potentially look past Gerwen Price this weekend for me. Second seed as well. Van Gerwen's down in 5th and could have a tough run. Could play Mervyn King, who knows how to beat him on TV, as we know. And so yeah, I'd throw out Gerwen Price or James Wade for the title this weekend.
Yeah, I think they're probably quite sensible picks with the form they're in at the moment. The name that I'm going to throw into that is a name that will be very familiar to both of us, and that's Michael van Gerwen. We said he's gonna win a tournament before the World Championships, and I think it's going to be this weekend. He wasn't at it at the weekend. He knows that. He was evidently disappointed. He's going to win this weekend. Michael van Gerwen to win the European Championships. You heard it here first on Darts News Weekly on Tungsten Tales. I can see you're not too happy about that, Sam.
For me, he gets past Labanauskas in the first round, as much as I'm a big fan of Lucky D. But yeah, no, I'd say it depends really, because he's got 2 good players that he likes playing, but 2 players who could beat him, and that's Mervyn King and Ian White potentially in the next round. White's not in brilliant form. He reached the last stages last week, which got him into the tournament. He's usually quite highly seeded for this event, as we know. But Mervyn King's been playing really well for me, and could cause him problems. He beat him on the European Tour only a few weeks ago, and when Devon, of course, won his first title. And so for me, it depends, because if it's doublings on, Van Gerwen will win the title. But is a few days enough to kind of arrest that inconsistency? I'm not 100% sure. I'd say you're looking at. I'd kind of rule him out of the Grand Slam, because I think Gerwen Price will win that again. But we'll talk about that in the coming weeks. But it's like I said, I think the Players' Championship finals will be a big one for him. He'll go into the World Championships with confidence and with his favourite again if he wins that title in Minehead. And yeah, for me, I think it's too soon for him to be winning the title. But it wouldn't surprise me either to see him go out in the first round or reach the final and win it. He's one of those players. He's got the potential to go out. He's got the potential to go on and win it. He's no 2 ways about it.
Yeah, well, we'll see in the coming days. European Championship starting Thursday. Final, of course, played on Sunday evening. Thank you very much for joining me today, Sam. A little bit of a longer episode today, but plenty covered. And we've got the European Championship coming up, and we'll give you some predictions and some news about the World Cup of Darts at the same time, hopefully on Monday next week. Thank you very much for joining us, and we'll see you soon.